Welcome into Live from the Combine presented by Moody's. I'm Caroline Hendershot alongside Ethan Greenberg. We're live in Indianapolis. Ethan, how are we feeling this morning?
Feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
To set the stage here, like yesterday was Jets Day, like what we call, because we had Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji on the show. We have a great lineup of draft analysts joining us today in a couple minutes. And here in Indy is the day where the prospects start speaking to the media, and everyone talks about the defensive line class. They were the ones to talk today along with the linebackers. So, of course, that group, in terms of the defensive line, headlined on the outside by Abdul Carter out of Penn State.
Yep.
Mason Graham on the inside out of Michigan. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm excited to get the insights of some of these draft analysts because the Jets are in a great spot with the 7th overall pick.
They are.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling very excited. It's my first time at the Combine, so very excited for...
Yeah, and you had your experience of the St. Elmo shrimp cocktail sauce.
Oh, I did. I was very intimidated, but, we persevered, and it was definitely hot, but manageable, I would say.
Yeah, I think you did a good job.
Yeah. Anyways, as we kicked off this morning, bright and early at like 8 a.m., we started listening to some of the defensive lineman prospects start talking. Did anything kind of jump out at you off the jump?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the short answer is no, because I think a lot of these responses are what you would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is fun to see the people in person.
Right.
Because we don't go to Penn State games. Maybe you go to Michigan games.
Exactly.
I sure don't. But, Mason Graham is a big, big guy.
Yep.
And, I know what he's listed at, and I understand. But to see the body composition of the players is a little bit different. And I think that, I sat in on Mike Green, the Marshall pass rusher, his press conference. This is Mason Graham that we're showing right now, who's the highest touted prospect on the interior defensive line. And before I talk about Mike Green, you actually had a chance to ask Mason Graham if he met with the Jets.
I did get to chat with Mason Graham because go blue. Am I right?
Yeah, of course.
But no, I spoke with Mason Graham off to the side after he spoke to the media, and I asked him if he had met with the Jets and Aaron Glenn. He said he did. He thought it went really well. He really liked Coach Glenn. And then he said, of course, being a Michigan man, he went to a lot of Lions games, so he watched him a lot and just is kind of a big fan of his and the product that he was able to put out on the field, particularly because he's a defensive guy. And then he did add that when I asked him, what would it be like if you were to be playing in the Jets defense, he said playing next to someone like a Quinnen Williams. He watched a lot of Quinnen Williams tape in college. So he said it would only make me better. So I would only hope that the more that I would play next to him, the better I would get. So,
we're about to have Leger Douzable on set.
Yeah.
And he told me in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, he's unsure that Mason Graham will even make it to the 7th overall pick to play with this guy in Quinnen Williams, the number 3 overall pick in 2019. Obviously, this is not footage from this year's Combine. This is when Quinnen was a draft prospect, and he was the number 3 overall pick in 2019 out of Alabama, like I said. And Mason Graham is Daniel Jeremiah's 4th overall prospect.
Right.
And just watching Quinnen do this, by the way, this is a freak athlete.
No, he's making it look so easy.
This.
He's making it look so easy. And, Quinnen is a big dude. We have to remember that.
He's not a small guy.
Yeah.
It's funny to see, like I said, the body composition. Leger Douzable is next to me now, and I want to hear from Leger. When you're watching Quinnen go through this, how different is his body composition today versus when you're a college prospect and you're going through the 40 and the vertical and everything like that?
Honestly, I always try to tell everybody during the Combine and Pro Day, it's probably when you're probably your most chiseled because you're literally trying to get rocked up to look good in front of teams, and then also you're just in the regiment. Every day is literally focused on the Combine and what you have to do, whether it's the 225 test, whether it's the 5-10-5, whether it's the 40-yard dash that we just saw. You literally just eating and breathing this workout, right? And it's literally something that's going to take, entirety actually on the field 5 minutes, but it's a pivotal point of your career when you're starting off trying to get into the NFL. So, I always tell everybody, that's probably the best shape you're going to be in your life is literally getting ready for the Combine.
Okay, Leger, I want to tell you what I was just telling Ethan. Now, I spoke to Mason Graham. I know you're a big fan of his.
Yeah, I am.
I spoke to him after he spoke to the media, and I asked him if he had met with the Jets. He said yes. He thought Aaron Glenn was everything that he was kind of built up to be. He obviously had watched him a lot because he's a Michigan man, as you know. But he said that if he were to be able to play in the Jets defense, being able to play next to someone like Quinnen Williams would only make him better. I know you've talked about that before. What do you think?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I was telling Ethan, the Senior Bowl, I don't think he makes it to 7.
Yeah.
But you got to think, just looking at Mason Graham's tape, and I know we're seeing some right now, he played next to a guy that was big, right? And Kenneth Grant, who most likely will go in the first round as well. I think it's just important to have two guys that can feed off each other. And you guys know this. I've been a big proponent of saying for years they need to draft somebody that can grow with Quinnen Williams, that can learn behind a perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro type player. That way you have great depth there for the foreseeable future. So I know Leonard Taylor is probably going to be part of that conversation as well. But I think they need to draft a guy. And I think this is the year of any years. If you want to draft a D-tackle, it's in this class.
So, hypothetically speaking, Mason Graham is off the board with the 7th overall pick. Is there a player that you think could, A, make their way up to the 7th overall pick at defensive tackle specifically, or you're looking more in round 2 and round 3 and so on and so forth?
A guy that I just talked to, Walter Nolan, he's my DT2. To me, his comp, and I hate comping players, but he reminds me of Ed Oliver and Keanu Benton. Right?
Okay.
He's explosive.
Oh, yeah, I remember you saying that in Mobile.
Yeah, very explosive. He creates havoc in the backfield. Really good pass rush ability from the interior. And I don't know if you guys got to hear his press conference. I loved everything he said. I actually just got to spend like 7 minutes with him interviewing him. He's wired the right way.
What stood out to you?
Well, people asked him to describe his game, and he said violent. And I told him, go into description of what you mean. He was like, people say they love this game, but he's like, it's not a happy fairy tale game. Like, it's a violent game. Like, you have to impose your will on somebody. I was like, I want that on my team.
Right.
I want that on my team. So, people may say that's a little rich at number 7, but again, this draft class is deep with defensive tackles. And if you're talking about Mason Graham being gone, the other guy that I would feel comfortable at 7 would be Walter Nolan.
Okay, so on the Walter Nolan subject, he's listed at 6'3", 300. And I was curious because this is kind of a longer story, but in Mobile, I watched him go through the D-line bags, like the dummies, and I was like, that looks kind of like Sheldon Richardson, the former Jets defensive tackle, first-round pick.
Good comp too.
And so then I just looked it up. Sheldon Richardson is 6'3", 293. Yep. Granted, you got to take this with a grain of salt because the height, weight on the internet, you never really know. But do you see any of, similarity in terms of the quick twitch nature between those two guys?
Yeah, and that's why I comped him with Ed Oliver. Because literally his game is based off of quick twitch, getting in the backfield, and creating havoc. That's what Walter Nolan does. I think another cool caveat about Walter Nolan is when he came out of high school, he was the number 1 recruit overall. So for him to be able to still live up to that billing and still be a potential first-round pick, I think gives some calmness to teams because if he does go in the first round, he's not going to feel the pressure because he's felt the pressure his entire life being the number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school. So I think that's another thing that gives him kind of like a gold star that, a lot of guys, they may fold under that pressure, but Walter Nolan's dealt with that his entire life.
What other guys did you talk to today that kind of stood out to you or maybe said something like you were saying earlier where it was the right thing to say?
I think Nick Scorton was a really good interview. Also, Shamar Stewart, who is probably going to blow up the combine. I mean, this is a guy that has been question marks about his production, only 4.5 sacks his entire career. But when you watch the tape, the explosive ability at 6'5", 200 and almost 90 pounds on the edge is out of this world. And guys, he told me that if he does everything right, he's going to run a 4.4 tomorrow.
No way.
Which is, there's no comp for that. My comp for him, honestly, was Jadeveon Clowney based off the traits. But Clowney didn't weigh 290. He was like 280, maybe 275. If he does that at 290, there won't be a comp for that. But you see it on film, right?
Yeah.
And when we talked about the lack of Gotti's sack numbers, I asked him about that because I was like, when I watched the tape, you're getting pressure. You have the quarterback in your grasp. There's other times the quarterback might sidestep him. I was like, is it as simple as finishing, or is it a mental thing that you just got to get over the hump? He was like, man, it's just finishing. He's like, sometimes I feel like I win so easily that I'm out of control when I get to the quarterback.
Almost like surprised in a sense. Yeah.
So I think that's something that he's cognizant of, and then he'll try to rectify at the next level as well.
The defensive line group is renowned as one of the deeper classes
for sure.
In
I would
recent
say maybe
years.
In history.
Okay, in history.
Wow.
For
there
sure.
you go.
Yeah.
So, but with some of these guys though, like Jalen Walker, because he plays everywhere. Jalen Walker and Mykal Williams, very different body types, very good players out of Georgia. Obviously, a big school in terms of pedigree, in terms of producing NFL players. When you see Jalen Walker, what do you think his role looks like on the pro level compared to what he's asked to do for the Bulldogs?
So I was blessed to interview him as well, and you guys asked me if anybody impressed me, it was him.
Okay.
First of all, cool thing about Jalen Walker, he's got an old soul. Like, if you don't know this, he's a singer. Like, he was in singing competitions when he was younger. Yeah, he grew up in the church. And I asked him to give me his top 5 artists of all time. And, somebody that's in their young 20s, you would think you might get Drake, Wayne, Kendrick Lamar. No. Gladys Knight and the Pips, Luther Vandross, Anita Baker.
Wow.
So that right there, he won me over with that right there alone. But he's a guy, too. I've had a lot of conversations with different scouts about him. His skill set is so crazy because by position, he's a stand-up linebacker, but he's also one of their best pass rushers. I mean, just go back to the Texas game and versus Calvin Banks, 3 sacks. And that guy is going to go in the first round. So his skill set, it's honestly, you know who reminds me of? A guy that used to play for the Jets and was an all-pro last year for another team, unfortunately. Frankie Louvu. A guy that can play, stand-up linebacker, but on third down, go on the edge and rush. I think that's what his skill set is going to be at the next level. It'll be interesting to see what the team does with his versatility.
Okay. Well, do you think because this defensive line group is so deep that you could get someone in round 2 or round 3 that could be still a game wrecker for you in that same way?
And that's the thing, and that's a great question, right? Because if you're evaluating this class and you see that there's a deep running back class, it's a deep defensive tackle class, maybe we hold off and take somebody later. I would just pause on that because you just never know who's going to pan out and who's not. Now, again, if you're an offensive lineman, you're a receiver, this is probably a great year to be one of those 2 guys because some of those guys will get pushed up because they're not as deep in this class. Now, tight end, running back, D-tackle, some of those guys may get pushed down because, to your point, this is a deep class, and maybe we can find another guy later in the round. I, again, would just, caution that because you just never know how guys are going to pan off. If you're in love with a guy, take him.
Okay, so I know that this has obviously been a defensive-heavy conversation because of the nature of what's happening here in Indianapolis. We got to ask you about some offense.
Let's do it.
Because I know that people watching want to hear a lot about the quarterback, a lot about the pass catchers.
Yep.
So, I'm curious your perspective on this. Daniel Jeremiah, the NFL Network lead draft analyst, he's projected Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, at number 7 to the Jets. He obviously feels pretty good about that, pretty strong about that. But when you hear something like that and you see the way the Jets roster is being composed right now, what are your thoughts? Is that like a little too rich for Tyler Warren? Because there's 2 sides of this coin. There's, look what Brock Bowers did last season.
That's what I was going to bring up.
And I'm like, I think... But it's unjust to compare anybody to Brock Bowers after what he just did.
Correct.
So maybe, what are the stylistic similarities and differences?
You've been on X listening to Jet fans, huh? They were like, I told you we should have got Brock Bowers last year. But Tyler Warren's a different player than Brock Bowers. When you talk about a complete tight end, his comp for me, and I know this is heavy, is just a slightly, and this is not a slight at Tyler Warren, slightly less athletic George Kittle.
Okay.
Tyler Warren can do it all. I mean, guys, there were times they lined him up at center, and he snapped the ball and caught a pass down the seam for a touchdown versus USC. There's times they lined him up as the quarterback in Wildcat. There's times they give him end arounds. Like, he literally, and this is what I love about him the most, he will rip your face off in the blocking game.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a complete tight end, that's what Tyler Warren is. So, no, I don't think 7's too high, or, people always talk about positional value. He's going to bring you so much value because he's so versatile and can do so many different things.
And not to mention, when we were watching Tyler Warren, I'm seeing blue and white. I'm seeing 44. We're in Indianapolis. I'm thinking Dallas Clark, who could do a little bit of everything.
Somebody said that was a comp for them. I don't see it.
You don't see it. You see more of the George Kittle.
Correct.
But obviously, Tyler Warren, at this point in George Kittle's career, he was not the prospect in which Tyler Warren was or is currently.
Right.
But I think that obviously that's going to gain some steam here, but I think the debate will end up being what you just said, that is the positional value there for the 7th overall pick. But when you think about what Aaron Glenn said yesterday, you're talking about a makeup fit, I would imagine. Like, he seems to your point, that he'll do anything that the team asks. And he's so young to the position, too, because wasn't he a quarterback for a while?
He's done everything, man.
Yeah, so,
literally,
okay.
He can line up anywhere on offense.
Yeah, and it just gives you, I feel like, a better understanding of the entire offense operation when you have different experience at all of those things. Should we make Leger play a little bit of our game?
Yeah, we should. We should.
Here you go.
Okay, so this is what I have the number of cars here is less than yesterday.
Okay.
But basically, it's like a magician, I'm not Oz the mentalist. I'm not going to read your mind.
Okay.
But you're going to have to pick one of these cards. They are prospect names. You're going to have to make the case for why this player makes sense for the New York Jets.
Ooh.
And even if it doesn't really make sense to you, you have to convince everyone watching why it makes sense.
So you're essentially going to show us how good your argument and debate skills are right now.
Oh,
my God.
I mean, we kind of already did this one.
He just got the easiest pick. He pulled Mason Graham.
Make your case.
Go
make
ahead.
Your case.
Go ahead.
I mean, he is the number one defensive tackle in this class. When you talk about a guy that's pro-ready, has a pro-ready game, efficient hand usage, people are talking about his arm length like it's an issue. When you turn on the tape, he gets his hands from the ground to the man so quick it doesn't matter. Like, he gets his hands on offensive linemen before they get them on him. So it kind of mitigates what people are saying about his arm length. And then when you talk about being a disruptive pass rusher, right, that's the thing that quarterbacks hate the most, interior pass rush. And that's why I think a pairing of him, Mason Graham, and Quentin Williams would be nightmares for offensive linemen. Like, plays with great leverage. He doesn't get moved off the ball on double teams. Like, he's the complete package, right? When you talk about a guy that's pro-ready, that's Mason Graham.
Awesome. Leger, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate you. And loved your debate because I want you on my next debate.
This is the conductor of the Mason Graham train right here.
Correct. So it was a very fit pick for him. But, all right, it's an exciting time here at One Jets Drive, everybody. And we're already counting down the days until we're back at MetLife Stadium. There's never been a better time to lock in your 2025 Jets season tickets to make sure you are part of all the action and energy of Jets game days. Visit nyjets.com/season tickets or call 1-800-469-5387 to secure your seats today. Ethan, I do have to call you out on something. You said Oz the Mentalist.
His name is Oz.
Isn't it Oz?
Look it up. His name is Oz. Pronunciation guide. I'm getting head shakes over here. I just blew everybody's mind, similar to Oz the Mentalist.
I don't think I've ever heard
It's not
him
the Wizard of Oz. It's the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, whatever you say. Alrighty. Well, we're joined by another special guest on our set, Pro Football Focus draft analyst Trevor Sikkema. Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing good. Also, the only O's that I recognize are SpaghettiOs. So I don't know if that's a fact, if you are correct here, but I'm just not going to accept
it. That's fair, because honestly, I didn't accept it when I saw it. But I'm just trying to do my job well. Pronunciation matters.
Yes,
Shout out to O's, though. I do love the clips.
They are mind-blowing, so we'll give them credit where credit's due. All right, Trevor, you were bouncing around all over the place this morning. I feel like every time I looked over my shoulder, you were at a different podium. What did you like the most this morning of what the prospects were saying?
Honestly, it is such a great year to need any sort of defensive lineman or any sort of like front seven player, because there's so many of these guys that are awesome. I mean, Donovan Izaraku from Boston College. I mean, he's walking us through his pass rush plan and his favorite move, a ghost move. But he's like, well, you can't just ask me about the ghost move. Like, you got to ask me about how I set it up. All right, you can't just go to a ghost move. You got to do this first, and then you got to do this first, and then just hearing from him. He was fantastic. Jalen Walker was as well, the linebacker / edge rusher from Georgia, former coach's kid, and just the way that he spoke so eloquently and confidently about the game of football, saying how he wants to be a defensive chess piece for teams. Then you got some dudes, some monsters on the defensive line. Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, Mason Graham. I mean, these dudes were all just so very impressive, and it's just great when you get to watch these players on tape and you're so impressed with what they're able to do from their athletic ability, whether it's speed or strength, of a combination of that. And then you see them here in Indianapolis and you get to know them a little bit better, even if it's just in a snapshot of a 15-minute podium session. To me, it was just more reinforcement to it is such a deep and impactful defensive line class this year from what we learned here on day one of at least the prospects hitting the podiums.
But on the offensive side of the ball, like looking ahead at the rest of the week, are there specific podiums or specific prospects or even just that you're looking forward to seeing, maybe even just from like a body composition standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, like the body composition part is a big one. I think this tight end class, right, going to the tight end class is not just the guys at the very top. It's not just, I know that Tyler Warren's going to sound like, somebody who is just built to play the game of football at the pro level. Like, I already know that. I think Colston Loveland, coming from the Jim Harbaugh system and the Jim Harbaugh program at Michigan there, with Sharon there now as well. Like, those guys I know are going to be impressive, but, like, I can't wait to watch some of those other players, Terrence Ferguson, a Gunnar Helm, an Elijah Arroyo, like guys like that. And so this tight end class as well, I'm really looking forward to see that, because with the tight ends, I mean, you have to be built a certain way to be able to play the tight end position successfully at the NFL level. So sometimes you do get to eyeball these dudes when they're standing behind the microphone in the podium and know that they at least look the part as well as what you see on tape.
What is Colston Loveland's game like compared to Tyler Warren? Because I feel like after the Senior Bowl, we hear about Elijah Arroyo, we hear about Mason Taylor. Like, those guys have kind of been out there. But Loveland, I know he's a top prospect at the position.
Yeah.
Just don't feel like we've heard a lot about what he provides to a team.
Yeah, it's man, in another draft class, Colston Loveland could be far and away tight end one, right? I mean, we'd be talking about him for any team that needed a tight end in the first round. He would be the name that we first brought to the table. But to Tyler Warren, he's such a great combination of like a throwback tight end that gives you that slot receiving ability. I mean, he caught a pass as a center on one play this past year, for goodness sake. So I understand why he's getting a lot of the notoriety, but I'll say this. I think a lot of people would naturally say, okay, Tyler Warren, top tight end in the class. How does he compare to Brock Bowers? And I think a lot of people will be like, okay, well, how does he compare to Brock Bowers from last year? Colston Loveland is the one that actually compares to Brock Bowers, because those guys are similarly built. Their games are pretty similar. Both of them a little bit smaller when it comes to just overall standards for an NFL tight end, but they're good pound-for-pound blockers. They'll still, you can play them in line or as a wing back off the line of scrimmage, and they can still give you some good blocking ability. Are you going to want them to go head up against 5 technique defensive tackles in the NFL? No, but they'll give you their all when they're blocking. But most importantly, they're phenomenal receivers. They're great in the slot. You can play them out on the outside in the X. So those are guys that have like true receiving versatility at so many different starting spots. So honestly, that's the best way that I would describe Colston Loveland. Is a lot of people are going to sit here and say, how does Tyler Warren compare to a Brock Bowers? But to be honest with you, Colston Loveland's a lot closer to that, I would say, just archetype of a tight end here in today's NFL.
So if you're looking at the Jets pick at number 7 and you're thinking kind of on the offensive side of the ball, are you going tight end?
I would say that there's 2 players that I would consider for them at number 7 on the offensive side of the ball. Tyler Warren is one of them. Tetairoa McMillan is the other.
Okay.
I think the wide receiver from Arizona, Tetairoa McMillan, is fantastic. It's so hard to watch him and not think of guys like Drake London, A.J. Green, Mike Evans. Now, those are very high comps, and those guys who have been very productive in the systems and the spots that they were drafted to. So I'm not saying like it's a for sure thing you're going to get that immediate impact. I mean, for goodness sake, Mike Evans has 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. So I'm not saying like Tetairoa McMillan's going to do that, but the skill set combination of how he is built, the arm length, the overall size, the yards after catch ability, just incredibly impressive hands. Yeah, the separation ability is a little bit lower, but he gives you that catching through contact ability when coverage is sticky to him. And so those are the 2 players that I think could have the highest impact on the offensive side of the ball for the New York Jets. And I think that he would be a great pairing combination with a guy like Garrett Wilson for a long time as those young wide receivers.
And I imagine in this scenario mentally, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders off the board.
Probably.
So with that being said, quarterback-wise, whether it is someone in a day 2, day 3, whether it is late in round 1, maybe the Jets trade back up in whatever scenario you want to build, who's the guy that you're kind of, all right, maybe this is the guy we want to hitch our wagon to, develop a little bit and hope to see what happens?
It all honestly kind of depends on where they feel like they are and what they want the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years to be. Because, like, if you want a quarterback that can come in and play right away and play at a pretty high level, I'd tell you, okay, well, you probably want to prioritize a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who's played a lot of football in college, very successful when he was at UCF, when he was at Oklahoma. He plays just an incredibly clean game of football. He knows how to read defenses already. He knows how to make adjustments before and after the snap. He's incredibly accurate. The decision-making is great there for him. So this is somebody who is like, okay, I can plop him in as a starter, and I think that he won't drown, right? He'll be able to survive, and you could see what kind of ceiling he might have in the years that follow. But if you've got a more long-term vision for it, well, then you talk about a guy like a Jackson Dart, who I think is really naturally talented when it comes to the movement abilities and his arm talent, but he's coming from a Lane Kiffin system that is simplistic in a lot of ways, right? Lane Kiffin does a great job, and I'm not bashing Lane Kiffin for this. In fact, I'm praising him for it. He knows offense so well that, especially at the college level, he knows how to tell his quarterback, hey, we're going to run certain play concepts and receiving concepts. We're putting one defender in conflict right here. You read that defender. If he comes up, you hit him over the top. If he goes back, you hit him underneath. And it's just it's more simplistic, and he can simplify the game. When you play at the NFL level, these defensive players and these defensive coordinators, they're so talented, they're so smart, they can throw so many different things at you that it's a little bit more complex thinking. And so I think it'll take a little bit for Jackson Dart to get there. But again, that's sort of an investment that you can make and say, we don't need him to be great in year 1, but year 2, year 3, we're hoping to get a good starter and then seeing what the ceiling is from that point on.
Now, Trevor, I want to think about the opposite side of the ball now, defense. Let's go back there, because we've been hearing again and again how deep this defensive line class is. Now, it's 7 if the Jets are on the board, and we're thinking defensively, where would you go with that pick?
Yeah, it was a guy that Lizier was talking about a bunch before I popped on here. I mean, Mason Graham's got to be the target that you have at number 7. He's just fantastic. I mean, he's an absolute ox in the middle. I think he's incredibly strong. He plays with really good natural leverage. He doesn't have the longest arms, and so you worry about that maybe being a little bit of an issue when it comes to block shedding at the NFL level. But I think he plays with so much quickness as well. He's got so much explosiveness. He pretty much filled out and built the way that you would want him to. It's not like you got to develop him in that area. 2 back-to-back seasons of really high PFF grades, especially when it comes to that run defense. So the floor is pretty much there for him already. You're just trying to develop what he could be as a pass rusher after that. If he's not on the board at 7 and you really want to make sure that you get a good piece next to Quinnen Williams, I would say there's probably going to be a good amount of opportunity to maybe trade back at that point. So then you could think about guys like Michigan teammate Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. Some other guys kind of come on the board where you go, all right, well, maybe we drop back maybe just a couple of spots, get an extra day 2 pick, because the more I do mock draft simulations, the more I feel as though when we look back at this draft class 4 or 5 years from now, it feels as though the team that we say like won this draft is going to be the team that really nailed rounds 2 and round 3, because it's a pretty deep class, and I feel like that's going to make up the core players that you have there. So all that to get back around to the answer, I don't hate the idea of them. Mason Graham's off the board, trading back and still getting one of those good interior defensive linemen, and then adding maybe an extra day 2 pick in there.
With that, sorry, I'm going to cut you off. With that round 2, round 3 perspective in mind, do you feel like there's someone who's maybe flying under the radar, defense or offense, that you feel like is going to be one of those pieces or one of those players that when we look back, we're going to be like, wow, I can't believe they got him in round 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of defensive linemen that are just, in other years, they might be seen as a 3rd-round pick this year because it's just so deep, whereas in previous years, maybe they're almost like fringe first-round guys. I think of a guy like TJ Sanders, the interior defensive lineman from South Carolina, who I think is an incredible pass rusher and brings you a lot of great potential there as a one-gap penetrating sort of 3-technique defensive tackle. I mean, allowing him and Quinnen Williams to kind of work together and run stunts and games and twists and be able to both pin their ears back and get after the passer. I mean, that's a really tough assignment for any interior offensive lineman. Omar Norman Lott, the same position as somebody who is one of my guys in this draft, who Tennessee does this thing with their defensive line where it's almost like a hockey substitution where you're shifting the whole line in and out. That's kind of like what they did for a lot of this year. So he didn't play a lot of snaps, but he was very impactful. So his passer's win percentage was really high. His solo run stop defensive numbers were really high, just because it's like, okay, he doesn't have the sheer volume stats. He doesn't have a ton of sacks or a ton of tackles for loss, but per snap that he is out there on the field, he's really high. So those are a couple that just kind of come to my mind. I mean, at the edge, I think of guys like Landon Jackson from Arkansas, who I think is really solid, who, again,
he's
is
so long, too.
Yeah, and he can play so many different positions for you. You can kick him into a 4-eye technique or a 3 technique, or you can play him as a stand-up outside linebacker type. I mean, he's super versatile and understands the game really well. I've had the chance to sit down and interview him, and he's just he's got a great story, got a great background. He's a really talented kid, and I just love the way that he attacks the game of football. And genuinely, I think he could be a late first-round pick in other draft classes, and now we're pretty much just saying, like, yeah, he's going to be a second-round pick because of how deep this is.
That's crazy.
Tough year to be a prospect along the defensive line is what Trevor's saying.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the safety position, though, because the way the Jets roster is shaping up right now, the Jets have a lot of free agents to be at the position. Chuck Clark, Ashton Davis, Tony Adams is a restricted free agent, so there's a likelihood or there's a potential chance that he's back. And this year's safety clash is what's kind of the landscape there. I think a lot of people are familiar with Malachi Starks. But where do you view him, and how do you view the rest of the guys that follow?
There's some interesting guys at the top. Malachi is obviously the guy that people have been talking about a long time. He's very interesting. I think he's an incredibly talented player. I think the thing that I would boast the most about Malachi Starks is 5-star athlete prospect coming out of high school. And he's somebody who played wide receiver. He played, I think, a little bit of quarterback. He played defensive back as well. And he gets to Georgia, and they go, okay, well, you're a defensive back. We're going to put you at safety. We're talking about 2022 here, which is right when Georgia was in the middle of national championship runs and having the best defense in college football and the best unit and everything. This guy starts as a true freshman immediately in that environment for a Kirby Smart defense, and Kirby played defensive back. So it's like you have to really be on your P's and Q's because he holds defensive backs to a higher standard because he played that position, so he knows it. Malachi earned a starting spot right away, and it impacted right away. So those 2 underclassmen years were fantastic from him. It was kind of a bummer because he wasn't as impactful this past year, but I kind of just chalk it up to like, hey, he just kind of had a down year. It's not really anything that I look at and go, man, yeah, we got issues that we got to worry about at the NFL level. So I do still think that he's the top safety, but Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, if you want to have the structure within your defense to allow one of your safeties to truly just roam the middle of the field, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this guy. He's had so many interceptions over the last 2 years for Notre Dame. It's absolute ball hawk. He's fantastic. You get a super versatile player like a Nicky Manwari from South Carolina that is more of that box safety hybrid player who can play strong safety for you in two high situations, but he's built like a linebacker. He's like 6'3", 225 pounds. He's going to put on an absolute show here at the Combine with his jumps and his 40-yard dash. I mean, he's going to be a beast. And so he's sort of somebody that, like, all right, well, if we like to play one safety a little bit deeper, we like to have one play more as a linebacker, a speedy linebacker, he's an option there for you. And then you get a little bit further and some other guys. I think that Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State could have been the number one safety in this draft, but he went through injury this year. We barely got to see him play, so his best football is ahead of him. You know, a guy like Jonas Sanker from Virginia, who I think is a pretty heavy hitter, a thumper over the middle, who you don't have to draft in the first or second round, but you might be able to get him a little bit later. These are just some names that kind of come to my mind when I think about the Jets and some different phases of not only the different types of safeties that they could prioritize, but just a couple of different rounds where they could target these guys.
I could listen to Trevor talk all day because I feel like I'm learning new players every time he opens his mouth.
Absolutely.
Because he's naming like the entire draft class.
And
now,
some fun facts as well.
You betcha. Now, is there someone in particular that you think fits an Aaron Glenn as a head coach system?
Okay. We haven't brought this name up yet, and we haven't talked about this position yet. Azareye'h Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State.
Okay.
I just think that the dude's got the attitude that Aaron Glenn would love. And the more that we do mock draft exercises and we sort of talk, we're getting into the season of it's more of predicting what's going to happen with these mock drafts. The more I think about it with Aaron Glenn, the more I just think, okay, if they're moving on from Aaron Rodgers, it means that it feels like it's going to be a little bit of a retooling of the roster over the next couple of years. That means I think he believes he has full control to take the best players available and the guys that are going to fit the culture that he wants to build. Azareye'h Thomas is a man coverage, in-your-face, feisty type of a cornerback that I think would be excellent on the opposite side of Sauce Gardner. He is somebody who I think brings that sort of like culture that they are trying to build of this competitive toughness, this just overall competitiveness with you. And obviously it's a position that Aaron Glenn knows very well. So if he's going to draft anybody as a defensive back, they better be wired correctly. And I just think that, like, when I watch him play and I hear about, you know, whether it's people at Florida State or other draft evaluators who kind of know anything about him, have those little tidbits, it just feels like everybody's like, yeah, this is a guy that you want on your football team. So he is the first guy that just popped into my head when you asked that question.
Okay, Azareye'h Thomas, Florida State, I love it. Were you here when I did this with Leger?
I was, yes.
Okay, so you know the drill.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, it's time
so,
for you to
we'll
make
see.
your
We
case.
talked about a lot of people. Maybe you'll get, well.
Don't want to see it?
Yeah,
Can't
put
see
that
it.
right in
No
the middle there, a
cheating,
little shuffle.
Can't be cheating here.
Okay. I'm curious where you're going to go. Middle, an end piece? What's going on here?
Okay, so I'm going to take this one here.
And who'd you get?
Oh, we already talked. Okay,
great. All right, so
go.
make the case for him at 7 and why he's a good fit for the Jets.
So I'll make the case for Colston Loveland, the tight end for Michigan, at number 7 for the New York Jets. And that's the reason why is because sort of what I talked about before. If you want a player who can be anything close to what Brock Bowers was last year, which is a record-breaking receiving type of a tight end, this is the type of player that you go get. And I just think that the way that Jim Harbaugh trusted him, again, to be an underclassman and get on the field very early, it speaks volumes to who he is as a football player, his competitive toughness, his football IQ, and then he has just got such great flexibility, agility, smoothness to how he runs routes as a tight end. And again, it's just you don't think about a tight end lined up in the slot or coming over the middle or whatever it is to just have this type of speed and flexibility and route running ability that Colston Loveland does. So that's why I would make the case for him there at number 7. I've seen some other draft analysts who have him actually around that range, so it's not this crazy type of a stretch. And so, look, if you want to improve the receiving game, say a Tetro McMillan is gone, or you just really want to emphasize the tight end position, Colston Loveland's some guy who could do it all for you.
There you go. Case made. Trevor, thank you so much. You are the best. You helped out a ton and gave us a lot of new insight. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it anytime.
All right, Jets fans, make sure everyone tuning in for today's show, be sure to stay up to date with the Jets all season long with breaking news, alerts, and the latest team information sent straight to your phone. Text JETS to 26154 to subscribe today. Terms and conditions may apply. I would just like to point out the elephant in the room.
Yep.
Mason Graham, Colston Loveland. 2 cases made for 2 Michigan men. I just have to say go blue. I just had to get it out of my system.
What you're saying is this is a rigged show?
No, all I'm saying...
That was the script?
All I'm saying is that we have some players that happen to be from the greatest university in the world, the University of Michigan, and I'm a fan.
I think the guy to my left, Charles Davis, would have something to say about the greatest university in the world that you just said, Michigan, considering Charles Davis is a Tennessee Volunteer.
He was smiling very politely at me as I was saying that.
They've won a natty more recently than my school, so there's nothing I can say about that part, and it is one of the great schools. One of my 6 visits out of high school was at Michigan.
Really?
There you go. Yeah. We could have been fellow Wolverines.
We wouldn't have been there at the same time.
That's correct.
Because you actually, this century, me, previous century. So other than that,
well, at least you would have bled the same blue.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Of course.
You're kind of wearing your blue today.
M go blue, but great visit, fantastic university. We all know all of those things that go along with it, and I'm happy with my choice. I'm glad I went to Tennessee.
You know, so someone that we haven't talked about in really our time here and over the last 2 days is Travis Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying
you haven't talked about
no,
it?
not yet. Today was the draft day. We're waiting for you. Right. So here's the thing, and I know that Travis Hunter is almost likely. You know, nothing certain in the draft. Let's just say he's off the board when the Jets select at 7. I'm just curious from your perspective, from someone who's been doing this such a long time, is there any type of comparison for Travis Hunter being a two-way player, and where do you think he lands in the pros? Is he going to be a one-position guy? Is he going to help out on one side of the ball when needed? Or how does he project for you?
Yeah, I think let's start with that last part. I think he'll be a position plus, right? He will land on one side of the ball, and then at different times, perhaps – not even perhaps. At different times, I think he'll go help the other side of the ball. But I think whoever grabs him, it'll be a cautionary tale. Let's make sure he gets good at something. Mm-hmm. All right? Let's make sure he gets there. Isaiah Simmons coming out of Clemson. Not a two-way player, but he was the jack of all trades, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. So people have what I call whiteboard fever. All right? You go up on that board and you go, well, I can play him here. I can play him here. I can move him here in this defense. Oh, he'd be fantastic when we run this set. I can go over here. And then his kid's like,
yeah, too much.
Right? He has still not settled in and found a true calling. And he was, the number 6 pick in the draft? How much of that is him? How much of that is other things? I don't know. But I do know sometimes too much versatility can get you. In this case, that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about longevity, wear, and tear. You want comparison? Gordy Lockbaum. Have you ever heard that name?
No.
Google Gordy Lockbaum.
I'll do it right now.
Holy Cross in the 80s.
Go Crusaders.
Played both ways. At one point, Sports Illustrated was touting him to win the Heisman Trophy. Okay. My guess is that he played probably 80 plays a game because we played ball differently then. Mm-hmm. We huddled after everything. We were a little more deliberate in what we did. But he played offense, defense. He ran special teams, the whole thing, just like Travis Hunter, right? Mm-hmm. Travis Hunter's averaging over 111 plays a game. That's different.
That's crazy.
Because we're going faster. So the ball snaps. We don't huddle. We go back and do it. I just don't know that over 17 NFL games that that's best for him. As far as, and especially when you're talking about an entire season in a career. I think most owners who get involved with their teams, and just about all of them do, will want him to play offense.
Mm-hmm. Now,
offense sells for them. I think he can play either one. I'm a defensive guy, so I'd put him at corner and call it a day. But that's really not the way this is done anymore.
When you look at someone like him, obviously you want him to settle into one spot, but that versatility that he offers, everyone is always going after the guy who's the most versatile, right? Sure. So what's that balance between the versatility and wanting that, but then also kind of owning that one position?
Yeah, own the one position, and the versatility I can create with whatever I'm doing elsewhere. He can play in my nickel package. He can play in my dime package if he's playing receiver. If I'm flipping him around, he's playing corner, and I need plays out of him, I run the jet sweeps with him. I throw him out there in the slot. I throw him out there wide in 3 or 4 wide receiver sets. I can do a bunch of things with him, but it'll be a defined smaller. I mean, I almost am sick of when we go, well, we have a package for him. I'm as guilty as anyone, so I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm like, oh, God, why do I keep saying that, all right? But that's kind of what it is. You have a certain amount of plays and things that you're going to want him to do because you just can't go, okay, full-time, I got you. Okay, now go full-time over here.
Right.
It's just a different level, physicality. Plus, I can't wait to see what he weighs because there's a chance he might not weigh 180 pounds.
Right.
Right? If he's 180 pounds, am I going to be able to do both of these?
Right.
I think it's going to be very, very difficult to do. And that's why I'd like to see, that's why I think a lot of people want to play receiver. Because I think a receiver at 180 versus corner at 180, hitting people. Here comes Derrick Henry. Here comes Joe Mixon. Here goes, it's just a different world.
Right.
You know, for someone like, or on the defensive side of the ball, we spoke a little bit about Jalen Walker earlier, but what about Mykel Williams out of Georgia? Was he on your show earlier?
No, did not have him today. Have watched tape on him, and you just see it when it all comes together. Texas would just as soon not see him again because every time he played Texas, he absolutely wrecked them. But did you notice the numbers weren't there anywhere else?
Right.
So we're trying to get the consistency. Why were the numbers not there? Now, he had an ankle injury at one point. Had to battle through some things. But when he makes plays, boys, it can be breathtaking at times. He can be really sudden in his movements.
Worthy of the 7th overall pick in your perspective, if that were the case for the Jets?
If you are a traits-based general manager, you'd be very tempted to take him. There's no question about it. And you also think, okay, if I get him, I like my coaching staff and what I think they can get out of him. He will be very tempting.
Is that like similar to Trayvon Walker at all
very
in terms
much
of the
so.
traits?
I think you absolutely nailed it. Remember, that was the big argument. Do you take the traits of Trayvon Walker or do you take the absolute production of Aiden Hutchinson? Now, here's the problem. We made it so black and white, and it really wasn't. Trayvon Walker, yes, traits, but they didn't ask him to do certain things at Georgia that they're going to ask him to do at Jacksonville. Do you believe he can do them? Flip over to Aiden Hutchinson. We're like, production. We're acting like he has no athleticism. That was stupid.
Very silly.
He does.
Yeah.
And we see it on display all the time before he got hurt. So here's the thing. Hutchinson's been so good that we act like Trayvon Walker is struggling. I think he's gone back-to-back years of double-digit sacks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. He goes overlooked.
Because Hutchinson has been on a team that is doing big things.
Right.
We thought that Walker would be on one of those teams. These last 2 years with Jacksonville have been stunning, right? We really thought Jacksonville was a playoff team 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They weren't. This year we thought, hey, this is a good chance to bounce back, get your quarterback back and the whole thing, and it was a disaster. It's surprising that we're not talking about both of them being playoff-type teams.
Now, we've talked about how deep the defensive line class is, but kind of the draft class in general. Is there someone that in round 2 or round 3 maybe is flying a little bit under the radar, but that you have in your mind as someone who could be a really pivotal piece for a team?
Can I go deeper than round 2 or 3?
By all means.
As far as you want.
Because I think he's going to go day 3 because of size and where he played. It's an edge rusher named David Walker.
Okay. Why is that?
Central Arkansas. Played at Central Arkansas. Transferred from Southern Arkansas. Okay, so the coolest thing about Central Arkansas is, you ever seen their field?
No.
It's purple.
Oh.
Okay?
Oh, yes, I have.
So they got a purple field, right? Which I like better than Eastern Michigan's concrete gray.
Yep.
Yes.
That's just me.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure Eastern Michigan will be like, Davis isn't tough enough. He can't play for us. That's what we'll do there. But this youngster's production is crazy off the charts. And when I talk with scouts, when I talk with GMs and personnel people, to a person, they all talk about how pass rush production does travel. Doesn't matter the level. Pass rush production, you're going to take a good, strong look at and say, hey, he might have a chance to make it. You remember the kid out of Ferris State a couple of years ago, Caleb Murphy?
Yep.
He's still in the league. All right, he went undrafted, but he's in the league. Guy's getting 25 sacks a year at Ferris State. I don't know that he'll ever be a star, but it happens. James Houston out of Jackson State, when he played with Dion, I remember Dan Campbell said we've elevated him to the fifth because we couldn't block him in practice. We just kept watching every week, couldn't block him in practice, and he did well. I'm not sure quite where he is now. All I'm saying is people like that. A scout told me this a long time. He calls it his home run hitter theory. If you see a person who doesn't have all the traits you're expecting, but they're continuing to do it, like if they're doing on that level, he said, I bet you can go back throughout their life and find out that they did it at every level, meaning that guy's hitting home runs even though he's 5'8" and he's whatever. He said, I bet he hit home runs in high school. I bet he hit home runs in Little League. I bet he hit home runs in Pee Wee. The whole thing. They do it all the way through. He used it with, remember the Rogers brothers, Jaquiz and what have you, the running backs?
Oregon State?
At Oregon State. They played Texas high school football. They were tiny.
Yeah.
But they were 1,000-yard runners in college.
And they were still able to be productive.
They were able to do it and be productive. Jaquiz had a nice pro career before he was out. So that was his theory to me, and it's always stuck with me. This kid has rushed the passer and put people on the ground every single season he's been a center. And by the way, he's at the Senior Bowl, and he was doing it there too.
There you go.
So
everywhere he goes. Okay, that's a good one.
The home run hitter theory.
Yes,
I like that.
I like that as well. Okay, Charles, we're going to actually make you play a game because you came on the set. So we're going to have you make your case.
Did I sign a waiver on this one?
Yeah.
You're going to pull a prospect's name, and you are going to make your case on why they make sense for the Jets. And so you're going to convince the audience that's watching.
Who do we get?
Jahdae Barron.
Jahdae Barron.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense because DJ Reed and Sauce, love them. Absolutely love them. But you can never have enough corners in this league. All right, now, would he be able to project inside? Would someone else be able to project inside if you're going to have all three on the field at the same time? Because remember, the Eagles tried that with the Dream Team, but they had three outside corners. None of them wanted to be inside and play. It didn't work real well. But this kid, movement skills, speed, toughness, big ball games, been involved in all of them. Not to mention, if you ever heard him sing country, he can do George Strait like nobody's business.
Really?
I'm just giving that one to you. You guys go ahead and find the tape, and you'll be able to
Is
roll
that
it
because
from there.
is George Strait, all my exes live in Texas, he went to Texas. Is there something there?
No, I think he goes deeper into Georgia's songbook. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, all my exes live in Texas. That's you and me going
Right, of course.
karaoke. It's low-hanging fruit. He can go deeper into the whole songbook.
Okay.
This kid he's the model in terms of what you're getting. And I think he got better throughout his career. He makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, yeah, by the way, Khalil Shakir has just signed a new contract in Buffalo. They're going to continue to add weapons there. Keon Coleman will be better going forward. By the way, they're in your division in case I'm remembering
You're
right.
correct.
Okay.
And a pretty good team at that.
Miami, the track meet will continue to go on as long as Mike McDaniel is there. So guess what? They're going to pitch it around. You might want to have some people to cover them, right? And New England, it can't get worse. It's only going to get better in terms of receivers. With Mike Vrabel there, Elliott Wolf, they're going to finally get some people. It's been, I don't want to do hyperbole, but it's minimum of four years, maybe 5. When's the last time anyone in New England scared you on the outside on the perimeter? Name a time you remember it. That's my point.
Yeah.
It's not going to stay that way.
Right.
It's going to get better because you got a quarterback. You better have some people you can throw it to.
Yeah. It's a great case.
So Jahdae Barron makes sense.
There you go.
Perfect.
Great case. We appreciate you, Charles. That was
Thank
awesome.
you. It's
and
great
we
to see you
loved
guys.
having you on.
Thanks, Charles.
Hey, appreciate you having me. You take care.
Thank you.
Congratulations to your Michigan Wolverines on the run you've had.
Thank you so much.
We just saw Mason Graham, and
Incredible.
he was talking about seeing Jack Sawyer at the medical. And I said, you two side-eyed each other, didn't you? And they said, well, it took a little bit. We kind of crossed the room. We weren't quite sure.
Gave each other the up, down.
And then they finally dapped it up.
There you go.
And I said, oh, so you're cool? He goes, yeah. He goes, we never lost to him.
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
That's a Michigan man.
There you go. Awesome. Appreciate you, Charles. All right, Jets fans, it's an exciting time here at One Jets Drive. We are already counting down the days until we are back at MetLife Stadium. There's never been a better time to lock in your 2025 Jets season tickets. To make sure you are part of all of the action and energy of Jets game days, visit nyjets.com/season tickets or call 1-800-469-5387 to secure your seats today. I love it that we get people on and I convince them to love the Michigan men like me. And here we go.
The floor is yours, Caroline. You can convince our new guests if you'd like to love the Michigan
Matt Miller
Wolverines
joining
as well.
the show. Do you happen to have an affinity for the Michigan Wolverines as well?
You know what? Here's a funny story. My mom is from Detroit, so I grew up in a household. My mom has 6 brothers, and so I grew up, even in Missouri, being told, like, you're a Michigan fan, you're a Michigan fan. Yeah, I mean, even, I hate to bring it up, but watching the Chris Webber timeout game, that's one of my earliest memories, and then the national championship year, 94.
I'm
I was a Charles Woodson guy.
We're
so,
everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
we're everywhere.
This
it's
show
incredible.
is rigged. It is
incredible. It's incredible.
It is rigged.
I didn't expect that to be. This is my first official interview on Radio Row. I didn't think I'd be talking about growing up as a Michigan household.
So we're batting leadoff for you?
No, this is the best. Start with the best.
Oh, okay. I mean,
you're batting leadoff.
Yeah,
yes,
batting leadoff.
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive right into it then with the hard-hitting questions. Not really that hard-hitting, but I do want to talk about the quarterbacks, especially with the Jets. So we've been asking a couple people throughout the week, like, who's a guy that you think, A, could make sense for the Jets? I'm not necessarily saying it's 7 overall, but maybe you just like their pro skills, like the projection of their skills and whether they need a little bit of development, whether you think they're more pro-ready than other people think. What's kind of your take on the landscape of how quarterback fits into the Jets puzzle piece with the draft?
Well, I think Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this draft, and I think he's also the most pro-ready, which is, there's going to be some learning curve there because of the style that he played in at Miami, but I think the arm strength, the mobility, that playmaker mentality that he has, you could plug him right away and have a lot of success. Now, you're going to have to maybe live with some of the bumps and bruises as he learns how to speed up his game and his process and not take some of the hits that he took this past year in the pocket and out of the pocket, but he would be my guy. Now, unfortunately, at 7, I don't think he's going to be there. And so then you move down the board to Shedeur Sanders. I think Shedeur could be a really good fit in New York, especially in the media market. I think he would handle that well. I've talked to teams that interviewed him, and they love how mature he is even as a young man. You could tell he's a coach's son. All that comes out. His love for the game is huge. I think all those things would work really well. Now, as Jets fans know, and as we've been through this a couple times, what matters more than I think anything is the structure you can put around that quarterback. Making sure they're protected, making sure they have playmakers, making sure they're coached up. So no matter who the Jets draft at 7 or where they add a quarterback, I think the lesson that has been learned is you got to make sure the table is set for that quarterback so that they can step in. Have a year like Jaden Daniels did. We were not talking about the Washington Commanders being a great quarterback destination 1 year ago. They went to the NFC title game because they made the right moves. Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. They made the right moves in the draft to get a left tackle in the 4th round. So I think it's as important that you hit on those things as hitting on the actual quarterback.
Now, what do you think about, like, maybe not even just quarterback, but just the player that fits kind of under the Aaron Glenn head coach style?
Man, I think about, and this is going to be oversimplified, but I think about just like who's a good football player, you know, and I think that's something that even my philosophy in evaluating players has changed so much over the last couple of years because you want people who are great at playing football that do it with high-end athleticism, high-end character. I think Tyler Warren from Penn State checks that box. I know tight end isn't, it's not a blue chip building block position, but this isn't a one off-season fix for the New York Jets. This is a multiple-year rebuild that needs to take place as they transition from going all in under Aaron Rodgers. So I think if you can get those pieces around a quarterback so that when you do have that opportunity to get one, that you have those guys in place. So I think Tyler Warren would be fantastic. If you went defensively, Mason Graham, a Michigan guy, man, he next to Quinnen Williams wouldn't be fair at all. And it's funny because they're very similar. I remember writing Quinnen when he was coming out of college, and it was like, this guy doesn't lose reps. He never loses ground. You don't see him fail. Mason Graham's the same way. It might not be eye-popping stats, and he's going to be short-armed, and he's going to be 6'3". Like, I don't care about that. He's just a great football player. And I think both those guys being super high character as well is what, when I think about Aaron Glenn and the type of players he'll want, it's those two.
I talked to Mason Graham after his media availability, and I kind of was asking him, what would you think of playing on the Jets defense? And he said, I've watched Quinnen Williams all throughout my college career. Playing next to him would only make me better. And we've heard Quinnen time and time again, season after season, kind of be like, I just get a lot of attention. He gets triple teamed. He gets double teamed almost every play. Having someone like Mason Graham next to him, do you think that would almost make not only Mason Graham productive because of Quinnen, but Quinnen more productive?
Absolutely.
And add in the fact that Will McDonald had 10.5 sacks last year.
I was going to say Jermaine Johnson coming back. Will McDonald, it makes everyone. I mean, like, it's going to get – we're going to say it way too much over the next 60 days, but, like, look at the Eagles. Yes.
Right.
You know, they had 2 good defensive tackles. They added Jalen Carter. It makes everyone better. It really brings everyone else up. So I do think, you know, adding another defensive tackle, you know, there's going to be people that freak out about, like, oh, well, they're both 3 techniques. They're both, you know, they're both gap penetrating guys. Like, okay, well, the NFL, they're throwing the ball 70 times a game. You need guys who can go get the quarterback. I think it would absolutely work if he's there at 7. That might be the floor for him, would be 7. Mm-hmm. But you could find a way, and I think even with Quinnen, he's versatile enough. He can move all over the defensive line. But it is going to bring guys like McDonald and Johnson up as well.
For the quarterbacks, I feel like, you know, in Mobile, it was Jackson Dart. It was Riley Leonard. It was Jalen Milroe. We've never really spoken about Will Howard. And you're talking about guys that, look, he was good at Kansas State, goes to Ohio State, they win a national championship. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the pro projection of a guy like that?
Will Howard's fascinating to me, and I'll compare it to Jalen Hurts. When he was at Alabama, Jalen got benched, they won a natty, he goes to Oklahoma, and then you watch him is really develop from Alabama, where he had this super tight throwing motion, everything looked robotic and stiff. He goes to Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. They loosen everything up. He becomes more accurate. He becomes more confident. And then we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and you were there. You probably remember that year. It's like, wait, this guy looks completely different than he did 3 months ago. And then we saw it here at the Combine. It was the development throughout the course of the process. I think Will Howard's the same way. Watched him at Kansas State, and I thought, he's a great college quarterback. He's never going to play in the NFL, right? Because everything was so stiff and robotic. And he doesn't have a huge arm. But then he gets to Ohio State, and they loosen him up. And Chip Kelly does a great job of developing him. It wasn't just the scheme. It was that the player got better. So, you know, I think Will Howard's got a shot to be late round 2, early round 3, depending on where we see the run on quarterbacks come. And that dude's ready to play right away. The Chip Kelly's scheme isn't – it's not always the most complex, but it's a difficult scheme to run. And he ran it better than anybody.
You know, someone we haven't talked about today, and it's not a quarterback. I'm sorry, I'm changing your topic again.
You're allowed.
Abdul Carter, we haven't really...
Because he's not going to be there 7.
Of course.
Is he going to be there at 2?
Probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would it ever make sense, and no one come for my neck because you might, but, like, would it ever make sense for the Jets to try to trade up for someone like him?
No, just because the cost.
Yeah.
You know, like when Houston traded back up to 3 to get Will Anderson 2 years ago, that was a shocker, right? Because the cost is just so high that if you're going to give up that much, it really has to be for a quarterback. It's the only position that has that value. Like, we could, like, live in a dreamland where he's there 7 and he's the pick, right? I mean, he's fantastic. And, yeah, he would fit exactly what we were talking about with an Aaron Glenn-type player. The versatility, the power off the edge. You know, you would plug him in just like they did Aiden Hutchinson, and he would be amazing right from the jump. So he's a special player. He's my number 1 overall guy in this class, like, with a bullet. It's not really close. But to your point, like, I don't know why the Titans don't just take him at 1 unless someone blows them away with an offer for a quarterback. And then even to that degree, you don't want to slide back very far because you don't want Cleveland to draft him at 2. You know, I mean, like, he's just a great player. And if they're going to lose Myles Garrett, that's certainly on the board. So I think if you're Tennessee, that's part of the calculus right now is if we move out of 1, how far can we go to make sure we get, you know, that we get either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, really.
Where do you see the receivers in this class? Obviously, Ted McMillan, a lot of hype around him, but excluding him, let's say the Jets want to add a receiver. If they trade back, they want to add a guy maybe in the second round. Is this a good year for receivers? And who are some guys that stand out to you?
So I'll tell you, I think I'm different than the consensus on Ted McMillan because I'm not I like Ted McMillan. I don't want to say I'm not a fan of his game. I have concerns about his game to where I wouldn't draft him in the top 15. I think he's more of a late round 1 player. Throw him into last year's class. He's not better than Brian Thomas Jr., in my opinion. He's not better than Xavier Worthy, in my opinion. Those guys were late round 1 players in a good class. There's going to be questions about speed. Maybe he can answer those here, but they're there on tape, and that's going to be an issue for his game. I think round 2, what you're hoping is that run doesn't happen, that it doesn't kick off into the 20s. maybe somehow Luther Burden slips to the second round just because we don't see the run on receivers, or maybe Matthew Golden from Texas slips to round 2. The more I've dove into the class, the more I like the second round. Guys like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, he had a great Senior Bowl week. Jalen Noel, his teammate, 2 very different guys in terms of body type and ability. Isaiah Bond from Texas, you got to figure out how to make that guy go all the time. He was great when he was dialed in and healthy. So it's like figuring that aspect of it out. He could be a number 1 receiver if you can get him dialed in.
Okay, so
all right, wait, before we get to make your case, I do just have to say for everybody at home this weekend, make sure you guys are tuning into NFL Network for all the 2025 NFL Draft coverage. It will be the combine and all of the drills will be all weekend long throughout on NFL Network. You can see it right now on your screen Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So there's going to be a lot of coverage. Make sure you're tuning in.
It's free football.
Yeah.
It's football in February.
Come on, we're missing it.
March.
We need some more.
Okay, Matt, so this is what we have to wrap up here.
Okay.
I'm essentially like a magician here. Pick a card, any card.
Okay.
These are all prospects. You pick one, you make your case why that player makes sense for the Jets.
I know.
Not necessarily at 7. Like if you got Abdul Carter, you'd have to make the case for trading up and making it happen.
I want the bent one, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
I got Abdul Carter.
No, you didn't.
I did. This is the easiest thing ever.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want me to take a harder player? I mean,
that's up to you.
Let's take a harder player.
Okay,
I like that.
Don't let me take the best player in the draft.
Well, you went for it.
Okay, Will Howard.
Okay,
there we go. Perfect. Look at that.
Oh, okay. Make the case for Will Howard. He is actually ready to start day 1. I think the athletic ability, the leadership. He doesn't have the biggest arm, but when you have weapons like Garrett Wilson, you need somebody that can throw a touch, timing, anticipation. Will Howard does that. And he gives you the mobility out of the backfield. I mean, he can run an RPO scheme. He can make things happen as a designated runner, but he also can create. He's just steady as they come. So is he going to be, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen? No, but he could be a really solid starting quarterback in the NFL.
There you go. Case made.
Case made.
Everyone
appreciate the time.
Everyone is really nailing these make your cases.
They are. Well, it makes sense.
It is our job.
It is in the job description. Awesome. Matt Miller, we appreciate the time.
Guys.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody watching from home. That's it from us here live at the Combine. Combine coverage will continue for the Jets all over our social media platforms, on our YouTube channel, and on our website, NewYorkJets.com. So make sure you're tuning into that all weekend long. But then as we go forward, heading towards the draft, all couple next months long.
I'm excited. Buckle up.
I know, this was very exciting. It really got me jazzed.
What did Aaron Glenn said? Fasten your seatbelt?
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go. Buckle up, everybody.
Buckle up, Buttercup.
All right. Have a good one. We'll see you later.